There you go.
All right, welcome back to our weekly builder series, builder developer construction series. I am Danielle Palloschi-Browne, agent investor, and this is my co-host and partner, Raj Tamang with Green Valley Custom Builders. And we're here today to do construction phases part 2. So we're doubling back from what we were talking about last week, and I'm really excited to go over we've got a lot planned for today. So footers, slabs, grading, electrical, sump pumps, and a couple of other things. So if you have any questions as Raj and I go through this pretty big list of really important things to think about when you're doing construction, leave a comment and we will try to respond as fast as we can. Awesome. Yep. All right, so Raj, do you want to kick it off? First thing we have on our list is concrete footers, which we've talked a little bit about this in the past, but why don't we talk about it a little bit more? There's always so many questions. There's so many nuances to it. You're building new construction. What is something to keep in mind throughout the process when you're thinking about footers? Well, what is a concrete footer? Why don't we start with that? Because I bet there's more people that have questions about that than you think.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, you need to understand its structure. I think I lightly touched Pest at the beginning. I don't know, like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, when we talk about the bearing walls and non-bearing walls, you need to understand there's a structure overhaul. So you have a floor, your first floor, second floor, basement, right? And all this is starting from. One thing you have to remember is basic. When we design it, we design from the roof down because that's how the load flows. All the load from the roof goes to the second floor. From the second floor, it goes down to the first floor. From the first floor, you have to safely transfer all these loads to the ground. That's the purpose. That's the safe design.
Got it. See, I would have, and the way my brain works is you would have actually started in reverse. You would have started like as you're building. So you design from the top down, but you build from the bottom up.
Yes, correct. Yes.
Got it. That's that's actually a really important mindset thing to note because I'm probably not the only one who's thought like that before.
No, yeah, exactly. A lot of people, there are a lot of builders who, contractors who doesn't have an engineering background, they may easily think, hey, that's how it works. But that's, you have to look at it's called load path. When I say load path, we talk about this is that you have to consider the weight of the structure, dead load, live load, is the people living in the structure or in the house. Then we have, depends where you are. In our area, we have to design for a snow load. Then you have to design for the wind or seismic load, earthquake load, depends where you are. In our area, for the light construction, we design for wind, right? So all that load is coming from the roof going to the floor, from the floor going to the foundation. But when you built it, you're building from the bottom.
Bottom up.
So
got it. With the plan already in mind of what you're supporting above it.
Exactly. Yes.
Got it. All right. So that's a really important thing.
Yes, it is. And also that's why the foundation footing is so important because your foundation system has to be properly designed. That all that load coming from the structure above is safely transferred into the ground. That's the whole purpose, right? If you do not design the foundation system properly, if the design is, let's say you under design, what happened? Your whole house may sink, right?
Yeah. And then it cracks because it sinks unevenly, or worse.
Yeah, that's even worse because. That also depends on the soil conditions, because there's some good soil and bad soil, right? If you have a clay, I'll just give you an example. Clay is the worst in the wintertime or summer.
Like all of Northern Virginia.
Always, exactly.
All of Northern Virginia.
Most part of Arlington, Fairfax, you have a clay, so you have to be careful. I have one project in the McLean yesterday. I'm ready to pour a foundation. We dug up the basement, then found out half of the basement is all infill soil. Soil. So what that means is, I don't know, maybe 50 years ago when the original house was built, there was an existing structure. But I didn't expect anything bad. But when we open up, right, demo the existing house, and I start working on a foundation, realize the half of the soil is really bad. So I may have to replace half of it, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet down. That's going to be a lot of money because you cannot just replace it. You have to mix it with the gravel. It's a lot of work, things like that. So designing a foundation means you have to really understand the soil conditions of the site. Okay. So let's say, that's all a part of it. That's why the foundation is the concrete part. Usually the foundation wall is concrete. You may be able to use different type of material like wood. Sometimes you use, sometimes block. If you look at some houses in Arlington or DC, like 100 years old, they don't even have a footing. Instead of concrete footing, they have a crusty stone and make like a footing, crusty stone. They cross the stone and gravel, make it like a footing and putting your block wall on the top. And you
make like a little pile of stones and then put a house on it, kind of?
Yeah, so you have, I don't know if I can share the screen. I can actually show the section of the foundation wall, how the foundation wall look like.
You should be able to. I hope.
Yeah, let me share the screen, okay?
Yeah, please do.
I'm gonna open up one of the files of the project, new house, and so you are in this cell. So let me open this file. Okay, dude, probably should have opened this one already.
Here you go. I added it to the stream.
Oh, you did? Okay. So that's good. Oh my dude, I have like hundreds of files here. Okay. Okay, I'm opening one of the project we're working on. Okay. So if you look at it, this goes to down. Okay. This is a whole complete building set.
Which includes all the details on how to do this or what the plan is to do this. And then when you submit this, this is part of your design and architecture, what we had talked about a couple of weeks ago and also last week in part 1. Once you put this together, you submit it for permits, the county or whatever municipal you're in approves it. This is then what you start executing on, unless you find something weird when you dig, and then you have to adjust from there.
Correct. So do you see my screen?
I do, yeah.
So you have a detail number 6, which is a building basement wall section. This is what it looks like. Okay? Mm-hmm. So this lower part, this is a footing. This is a footing for the basement wall. And this whole part is a concrete wall. Okay, so I don't know if I can open up here. Maybe I just don't open it. I don't know. Okay. Looks like that. So anyway, so this is a footing. Mm-hmm. This is a wall, concrete wall. That basement wall. And this is a slab. Mm-hmm. Okay, and this is a floor joist, this is a sill plate, this is the stud wall, first floor 2x6, 2x4, whatever design. Okay, so this is a section of the basement wall and where you see what the footing looks like. So how wide this footing you need to be is depending on how big the house is and how bad the soil conditions are, right? If it's bad soil, you have to go wider footing, of course. Mm-hmm. If it's a good soil, so you may not have to go that wide,
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. You need a wider foot if you're building taller, wider, bigger, heavier.
You got a bad soil.
Mm-hmm. And bad soil to prevent from falling down. So you go wider to prevent from sinking.
Correct, exactly. So if you have a wider, then it is spreading the load in a bigger area means your building does not sink, right? So that's one of the things. But you have to remember, any new construction for 5 years, in general, it will sink no matter what because of the weight.
Yeah.
Because you have this ground, never seen any load. Now you have a big structure, weight of the concrete, all the structure above, people living in it. So that's an additional load. All of a sudden, the ground has the ground, and this house will sink, very minimum sink. Hopefully, it's less than quarter inch or 1/8 inch. But that's expected. But it's not continuous process. It's not gonna sink your building for another 20 or 30 years continuous. Like I said, it's just the first 5 years, maybe. Okay.
Yeah. Is that what like people refer to as settling?
Yeah, that's a
settling a little.
Yes, that's a settling. But the settling, there's two types of settling. One is the whole house is a settling. If whole house is settling, it's a ½ inch. That's okay, right? That's not a big deal. What if one corner is settled 0, another corner is ½ inch, another is a quarter inch, and that's a problem. That's a differential settlement. So differential settlement is the one that's bad, and that creates a crack on the foundation wall because its whole building is not settling at the same time.
Got it. So how is that like measured over the first couple of years, or if you're a new home construction buyer, what would you recommend for someone to monitor or watch that?
You don't have to. Let me stop this sharing. Okay, now we're back. So first thing you have to see it is that, especially ground around the house. If you have a fully buried basement, you will notice because the basement is usually 8 foot or 9 foot basement.
Yeah.
If it is buried basement,
the height of the ceilings or
height of the ceiling, correct. Then you have to remember, we talked about this one before. If you have a 9 foot ceiling or 10 foot ceiling, you have to dig down another 8 foot or 9 foot below ground. When you dig the ground, you cannot cut vertically down. You have to go on the slope, right? So now when you backfill, that slope about up to 5 foot from the wall, it's a loose soil, because when you backfill, you cannot compact. If you compact the ground next to the basement wall, the basement wall would crack.
Yeah, because it'll move over time. It'll settle.
Yeah. That's why that soil is, if you compact it properly, it's not going to settle. But I said the backfill or dirt next to the basement wall around the house, it's a loose soil, and that's why it's going to settle over time. And you'll see, like, first for 6 months or 1 year, you see like 1 inch, 2 inches settlement. And people freak out, oh my house, but that's expected, okay? Because remember, that's uncompacted loose soil, so it's a settle. So not a big deal. You bring it back, and you may have to do it for a couple of years. Then you should be good to go, because you have to remember the soil is loose soil, but over time, because of the weight itself, it's gonna compact it by itself because of the weight, even though there is no structure involved. It's
rain, anything, like it just those little tiny air pockets just come out eventually. They make their way out.
Yes. So that's called a consolidation. That's not called settlement. Settlement is because of the structure or weight above on the ground, and it's a settle. That's a settlement. If it is just a settling because of the self weight without any additional load from above, that's called consolidation. So consolidation will happen for a few years. Then after that, it's not going to compact anymore,
Yeah, because it's already consolidated.
It's already consolidated, and that will happen first, a few years at the beginning.
Okay.
That's why I tell people, when there's a crack on the basement, the old house, new house, they call me all the time. I used to go a lot. Now I don't have time. I recommend to other engineers. But people really freak out when they see a crack. Oh, what happens now? You have a big crack on my basement. Some of the things people really concerned is if you see crack on the slab, on the basement slab.
Like the floor.
On the floor.
Yeah.
That's not structural. People freak out. That's not structural, because the only structural on the whole concrete area is footing and wall. Slab is, of course, it's a floor, it's a structure, but what it means is that you can always take out the portion of the slab and replace with a new concrete. It doesn't affect anything of the structural integrity of the building.
Got it. Yeah, because it's just like replacing a floor.
You're replacing a floor, so you don't really have to worry about it. If you see crack on the basement slab, on the floor slab, you don't have to worry about it, okay? It's not, your house is not going anywhere. If you have a crack on the basement walls, The problem with the cracks usually in the basement wall is because of the settlement, if the bad soil. And also settlement is also differential settlement, which is uneven settlement. If the whole house is settling 1 inch, that's fine, but that's not going to happen. So your corner is settling, maybe no settling. Another corner is settling half inch. Another quarter is quarter inch, and then you all of a sudden you start seeing crack and footings and the wall.
Got it.
One of the sign. Daniel, go ahead.
No. So I was thinking then with cracks, because I work with investors, so I see houses that are like have alleged messed up foundations all the time. And I get questions like, oh, is this one, do you think this is bad? Like, one, I have no expertise in being able to say if a crack in a foundation is bad or not. But what are your thoughts on if you see in a foundation, like say a cinder block foundation, right, which is super common in this area. See like a cinder block looking foundation, and you see a horizontal crack along a grout line or like a seam of that versus a vertical one. Is there a difference? Is one better than the other? Is one more expected than another? Or what do you think?
Yes. Daniel, remember there's one, I don't know when, we have this session coming about the structural issue on the foundation. All these things we can talk about that. But one thing I can tell you, if you have a horizontal crack versus vertical crack.
Yeah,
those are cracked, but the horizontal cracks are a structural crack. Mostly, 90%.
Vertical.
Vertical, no, horizontal.
Okay, so if you see a long line, that's really bad.
Yeah, so you have to think about this one. If we start talking, it's going to take another half an hour. But you have to remember the foundation wall. If you remember the section I showed before, the foundation wall has a footing. The footing is supposed to be in place. It should not move, okay? But the basement wall, behind the basement wall, there's a dirt, right? There's a soil behind
the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. Soil, the dirt is pushing the basement wall inside, towards the inside the house. It's pushing.
Yes, and that's what's causing the crack.
Exactly. When you push, remember the wall is on the base is a fix. On the also top of the wall, you have the floor system, means it's not moving. So all of a sudden you have a vertical wall, and there is a dirt from outside pushing. So it's gonna go like this, like try to bend or bow. So it's gonna bow in a vertical plane, right? So that's why when it's a horizontal crack, it's most likely because of the pressure from outside. It's pushing inside. Okay.
Got it.
Vertical crack, again, it's not typically not a structural. It could be hairline crack. It could be shrinkage crack. There's two types of crack. You have to remember, shrinkage crack is the one you mostly see on the slab and the basement slab. What that means is the concrete. I don't know if you remember. We talked about this before. The concrete is supposed to be cracked. It's gonna crack.
Yeah, it's porous. It's concrete. It'll dry out. It'll crack at some point.
Correct. If you understand how the mechanics, the chemistry of the concrete. We say you have you have gravel, you have a sand, you have a water, right? Then you put a cement, which is a chemical. So when you mix all together with the cement and water, it's called a hydration process. With the hydration process, it's drying, right? And that's how it takes the strength. Yeah, this is how the concrete makes the strength or become stronger. First, like it starts with 90 minutes and 3 days and 7 days. So it takes typically 28 days to get fully strength.
Yes,
so it's like
to fully dry to solidify.
Correct. So that's why when you shrink, it's gonna crack. Okay. So the minor cracks are expected. But the structural crack versus minor shrinkage cracks are different. There's some of the concrete is called on-crack concrete. We never use it. They use it for high-end military, structures where maybe even those structures are like nuclear bomb protected. Those is different. That's not for us. That's not for normal human being like you and me. So you have to remember, any concrete you use is expected to crack. So basement slab, when you see a crack, don't worry about it. Just go ahead and sometime if you see a crack, you can just go to Home Depot, get epoxy, As long as water is not coming up from the basement, you're good to go. That's not a big deal, you know?
Got it. Okay.
But
it's so funny that we actually ended up talking about this because I had a client of mine, a very good friend they're not an investor, but I'm helping them purchase their own home. And we saw one house, and in the photos, they could see a very skinny crack like this yesterday. They really like the house, and it's in a great neighborhood, but they see this very skinny crack horizontally along like a cinder block basement wall. And they were like, what does that mean? Is it fixable? I was like, I don't know. This is a photo. Like, for all I know, this could be a shadow. Like, we have to go see it in person. But I was trying to figure out, I was thinking about it. I'm like, is this worse than not? Well, like, what remedies would there be if you see like a horizontal crack? Potentially, obviously, like, this is not, you should have it inspected every single time that you go and look at something like this by an engineer. But what kind of ways can you remedy it? Like regrade outside, get water to not push against? Do you have to like rip up dirt? Do you reinforce it somehow? Do you do all of that? Like what happens if you have that crack?
So you can do all of that. So you have to remember, when you have a crack, the cinder block or concrete wall, okay? But inside the cinder block and concrete, you're supposed to put vertical rebar, usually number 4 bar, do you know what number 4, number 5, number 6 bar? So when you say number 4 is ½ inch, 4 divided by 8, that's a ½ inch bar, diameter bar. So number 5, number 8 bar means 1 inch bar, right? That's how it goes. So you have that vertical bar inside the wall, concrete wall or cinder blocks. Every 16 inches one center or 24 inches one center going on vertical plane. So that is the one actually resisting the load from outside. When it's pushing inside those basement wall, if you don't have that vertical bar, then you have a worse. So cinder blocks, especially those old homes, because nowadays new construction, we do pretty much all 90%, 99% I should say, if it's concrete. Cinder block, right, with the basement, but old construction you do cinder blocks all the time. The problem is you have a cinder blocks, and most likely they didn't even have a rebar.
Yeah, I think the home was built in the late 50s, 60s area.
Yeah, so even if they do, maybe they have a very minimum rebar. That means that all that load coming from outside needs to be resisted by the rebar. Vertical rebar. If you don't have it, you have a very minimum capacity of the wall itself. So that's why all the concrete walls, you have the rebar. And there's a reason, there's different thing. We can talk about that later. It's going to take another hour because concrete and rebar. Rebar does one thing and concrete does other thing. It's called reinforced concrete versus plain concrete. So pretty much you have a reinforced concrete means you have to have a reinforcement inside on the concrete wall. If you don't have reinforcement, it doesn't work the way it's supposed to work, right? So
it just crack and crumble.
Exactly. But now going back to your questions about what you can do about those horizontal cracks, there's so many things you can do. You can even do helical piles. There's some other you can even do. Let's say your wall is cracking and boring inside. You can install maybe number 4 inch column, steel column next to the wall, every 4 foot or 5 foot on center. Think about that.
So it helps the wall push back a little bit.
Push back so that it does not come back inside. Instead of pushing inside, wherever the wall is already, you don't want to push it back because then once you push it back, it may get worse.
Yeah.
Leave the wall the way it is. If it's already bowing a little bit, that's okay. But install those 4 inch, usually that's what I do. Square, 4 inches square steel columns next to the wall, every 4 foot or 5 foot on center. That column has to be embedded or fixed on the base, and also on the top, also fixed on the floor system.
Got it. Because it's got to carry the load going all the way up.
Correct. So it'll
carry the load from everything coming down.
Coming down. The load coming down is still going to the wall, but this reinforcement, called a bracing system, will help the wall to crumble inside.
Got it.
Okay.
So, and what would, say you had one wall, like what are the kind of like range of costs where that might be? It also sounds like that's something that if you reinforced a wall, say you have an unfinished basement, like this example that I saw, and it has cinder blocks, you put these 4-inch metal, I'm assuming they're metal, posts, if you will, from center all the way out. That's actually something you can hide in a wall too if you finish the basement. It doesn't have to be something out, right?
Yeah, of course. You can hide it. Yeah, exactly. You just you install next to the basement wall, then you can have 2x4 or 2x6 footing wall and do the drywall. Yes.
Awesome.
That's very traditional way. You can get a permit. You have to get a permit like that. You can do it. There's some of the other systems, some proprietary system in the market, depending on how severe the crack is, how severely the wall is bowing, right?
Yeah.
There's a
this one in particular system. Didn't really look like it was bowing. It just had a crack.
Yeah. So there's
the beginnings of something bad.
Yeah. So that may not be too bad. Then there's another system which is cost effective. You can actually apply a membrane, like almost stick, some kind of big sticker on the wall. The entire wall, you have a big sticker. So when it's pushing outside, the sticker is stick to the wall, so it's not gonna move inside anymore. There's some kind of membrane, you can find it. It looks like, oh, this may not work, but this is they have done a lot of research on it, and some of the commercial parking garage and even concrete buildings and bridges, they have applied this membrane system.
And the membrane, so does it work, like are the mechanics behind that basically that there can't be any moisture seeping in, wearing down the concrete?
So,
or is it really kind of like the stickers the Olympians wear on their arms and legs and stuff to like support their muscles? Is it more like an idea like that, or?
Yeah, it's a sticker. So you have to think about this. Sticker is sticking on the wall, but your crack is at one location, maybe 2 locations. Yeah. So when you try to go inside, the sticker is attached to the wall, so the wall is not going to crack anymore, unless the sticker cracks. But the sticker is so strong, it's not going to crack.
That's a strong sticker, Raj. I would love, I'm going to have to Google this, and maybe if I find like a video or something of this online, I will share it in the comments, because that sounds really cool, but it sounds a bit wild.
Yeah, there are a few companies in this area. I have worked with them. They do this type of work. I'd be happy to share their link.
That would be awesome.
Talk to them directly. Yeah. So no problem. They can talk to them directly. Again, if it is really bad, then the helical pile system and the 4-inch column system I was talking about is more permanent type of fixed repair. But if it is not that bad, if water coming out from outside, one of the things you have to remember with the basement wall, when there is a crack on the basement, it's not a structural. Now, all of a sudden, water from outside may start coming in.
Yeah.
So you fix it doing reinforcement inside, the water is still coming out. So that doesn't help. There are different ways of applying that waterproofing from inside, but I can tell you guys, applying from inside is not a permanent solution. You have to do it from outside.
Yeah. Unfortunately, so really digging out the soil, flower bed, whatever's up against the wall, likely the ground, digging that out and really getting that waterproofing on the outside of the house.
Exactly. That's the permanent fix. And you have to remember that all these things we do in the house, usually it takes like 20, 30 years, 35 years only. Even this old house. The problem is all this house we built, it's going to stay safely for another 100 years, maybe 120 years. Unless some crazy things happen, because you see all these houses in DC and Arlington, those are more than 100-year-old building. They are still there. But waterproofing is pretty much all gone,
Yeah. Oh,
so you can't have to reapply it again. Anything you saw like this, I told him, okay, guys, we'll try to patch it from inside, but you have to remember this will not be a permanent, because at some point there might be a hole. Because you have to remember water from outside is still coming in,
Yeah.
So
whether you can see it or not, right?
Yeah.
Like with water intrusion, it might not always look as obvious as like a stain or a trickle of water. Like it might not be obvious. I think it actually, somebody had told me that it can really, like if you see a spike in humidity, that's really an indicator as well. Is that correct? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's an indication too. But sometimes if you have a crack in one or two locations only, and you feel like maybe that's the only location that the moisture coming in, there's a way to fix it. Maybe you can make a hole from the inside and then fill the whole crack with epoxy chemical and stuff like that. You can do it. But that's only sporadic in few places only, right? But there are so many other methods you can apply in residential construction. They are very cost effective way of doing it, but it could be anywhere from 10 to 20 grand or 50 grand, depends extension of how extensive of the work you need to do. So that's why as a contract, as a investor and flipper, if you find a property like this and you say, okay, my renovation or fixing cost is another $25,000, and you know that you can structurally design it or repair with that money, and if you have that $25,000 embedded in your budget, why don't you buy the project? Why you have to scare about, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I really, the cracks doesn't not really scare me. It just that, and I think if you are not a structural engineer, not everybody is structural engineer. You can hire it, pay $500, $1,000, it depends. Have their opinion about how extensive it is, and if it is easy to fix, and if it is fixable, how much it's going to cost. And if you come out with the ballpark figure, then you can just go to back calculation and put an offer, right? Submit an offer. That's what I would recommend. Yeah.
All right. Well, that that is very helpful because, I think foundations are one of the biggest things that scare anyone, including investors and regular people looking for their own primary residence, that scares them from making an offer or making a move. So just having more information about it it's usually not as terrifying as some people think it is.
Exactly. If you see minor crack, don't freak out. Like I said, there's a sign. One of the sign I can tell you about the foundation settlement. If the house is settled, it's again you have to talk about a differential settlement, not the whole house is sinking at the same time. When you have a differential settlement, the sign you'll see in the house, some of the doors and the window may be stuck. You won't be able to open it. You start seeing some cracks on the drywall, on the ceiling, on the wall. Those are the telltale signs you can look for in the house all the time. All of a sudden, if you see some doors and windows, in a house is not opening, and then you can go outside the house to see if the ground is sinking or you see a little bit of sign of cracks. Then at least you give those things you can do it yourself, right? You don't have to hire an engineer for that. But if you start seeing all of a sudden your doors, some of the doors and windows are not opening, and you start seeing crack outside, then you start seeing water. When you see water coming from outside, then definitely that's a big sign.
Yeah, that's not good. It's pretty advanced at that point.
That's not good.
So besides like water intrusion and waterproofing, so we've talked a little bit about that. What about like pests, termites, wood destroying insects of like any kind? And obviously they're not eating concrete or a slab. Like if you have a slab or a basement home, like that won't necessarily affect that portion of your house. But what about like other parts of your house? Like I've seen termite damage on a lot of carpenter bees, like random stuff, especially sheds. What might you want to do when thinking about that? Like what should we know? What are the biggest things that we should know about preventing termite stuff?
I'm not so good with the termite, but we know that when we do new construction, the termite treatment is a part of our construction. So
how do you treat for termites or pre-treat for termites?
Pre-treatment, exactly. Because when you have a new construction, it's very unlikely you will have a termite immediately because it's new construction. You don't have any rotted wood, anything you are using in the house. Everything I assume is new, but now the soil might already have a certain termite or things there. So as long as you treat the ground before you pour in a concrete slab and outside the building, you should be okay. And usually the termite treatment company we use, they give us a 1-year warranty, and then also you can buy warranty up to 4 or 5 years if you needed to. But the new construction, I have not seen much. It's a termite. like I say, I would strongly suggest that pay for that $1,000. It depends. It may not be even $1,000 or $500. It depends how much you want to do it. But typically, 5, 6, 7,000 square feet homes, if you treat the basement or basement slab underneath and around the building, could be maybe $1,500 or so. But it's worth it. I think it's a peace of mind.
Peace of mind, and honestly, it goes a long way for the end buyer to know that this is something that they don't have to do for the first year of their ownership, but it's something that, like, I know my wife and I, we have our house inspected for termites once a year. And now I have a brick home and I'm on a slab, but I have a giant wooden deck, like made of actual wood. So that's more of what I'm concerned about. It's less about my home's stuff, but this giant deck that I have that's made of wood. And until we change it to like a Trex product, like this is something we want to just make sure is not there. And they also treat for other stuff too. It's not just termites, it's any wood destroying insects. They check for things like carpenter bees, which, well, it wouldn't affect the walls of my house. They could get in the roof. They can get in the trusses. Like they can cause a lot of damage there, I've seen. And they also look for things like squirrels. I live in kind of a wooded area, and I had somebody come out to just make sure there wasn't any mice that were around. Like, we're super clean. We're like really anal retentive about that kind of stuff. But still, it's just the nature of where we live. Yeah. And mice can be anywhere. It doesn't have to be in a rural area. There's lots of mice in urban areas as well. So anywhere in Northern Virginia and DC, honestly, that would be something that annually, or if there was something that popped up and you saw, you might want to have monitored at least once a year. It's not a bad idea. It's a few $100s, but it should be kind of on your annual house maintenance.
I agree. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Fun stuff. Like our neighbors, they have basements, our neighbors, and one of them had a snake in their basement. I was like, nope, not to deal with that. That's not uncommon for our area though. And those kind of animals, they don't need a lot of space to get into spaces like your basement and whatnot. So it's always good to have a pest inspection. General.
If you have a crawler space, the crawler space could be the worst, because crawler space is the place nobody goes there, but that's the perfect place, hiding place for snakes, anything. And exactly, rats, everything you can think of.
Yeah, this has really gone a different direction, but an annual pest inspection is super important, in my opinion. And I don't even have a basement, and I have a brick house. So it's still pretty important for lots of reasons. And like mosquitoes, like other pests, they can help you with all sorts of stuff. Cool. All right. So that termite treatment, something important to note, if you're building new construction, though, you may want them to treat the entire ground before you build the home, because that's where the termite eggs and larvae, that's where they kind of live. And because you're bringing in fresh wood, which is like super attractive to them. So let's talk about like other things that are in the ground as you're laying the foundation, you're building what you need to for the bottom of the house. Things like, what about like electrical? That's like my power is actually, I'm the only one on my street for whatever reason, but the power lines are buried coming to my house, not on the whole street. There's power lines, but just the lines that go to my actual house are buried. And there's power buried that goes from my house to my shed, which is toward the back of my property. So what would you need to do when thinking about like it, just kind of building this, like when you're setting this up, what kind of things do you have to take in mind when burying electric?
With the new construction, you see all these old homes in our neighborhood, Northern Virginia. Pretty much all the power lines are overhead, right? Yeah. But new construction all underground. That's the next step. I think all the utilities company, they want to do underground, but they are doing one at a time. So all the new construction, I've seen pretty much is underground. You just have to request them, and they do it on their cost. We don't have to pay anything extra. One of the things I'm not the electrician, but one of the things I know that when you have a power line connected to the house, you have to do grounding. It's called Electrodes system, right? That's protection against what? The lightning? But the lightning, Yeah, so that's very important in your house that the lightning doesn't hit your house. So, so the
Yeah.
electrode, that what happens is that you have an electrical panel in the house. The panel is connected to those electrodes.
Yes.
In traditional way, they usually have a copper rods outside the house, usually two rods, I think 8 foot or 12 foot apart, and grounded. And that cable wire is connected to the panel. That's the grounding. So that's your protection, against lightning. But new construction, what we do instead of doing anything from outside, we do it inside. That cable, the cable from or that wire coming from the panel is connected to the foundation footing all the way down. You try
Mm-hmm.
to ground it all the way down. So instead of doing from outside with the copper rods, you're using with the existing foundation. Make sure you do it when they are doing the concrete wall and foundation, because if you miss it, then it's too late. You have to do it, from outside.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
can.
wow.
That's the thing. That's the inspection you have to do. That's part of the inspection you have to do, and also make sure that the wiring is done properly.
Mm-hmm.
When they are doing, let's say, especially when they are doing concrete footing and concrete wall, when they are doing rebars and formwork, that wire has to be already installed, so that when they pour concrete, it's inside the wall. That's a part of it, something you have to pay attention. But one thing I would say is
Super
it's about
important.
exactly, that's very important and easy to miss if you don't pay attention, especially guys. If you remember, if you thought, oh, guys, they know what to do, they'll do it, but they may be busy. We're human beings, right?
Yeah. You
It's
you
there to
never
be
know.
processed. Yeah,
You never
never
know.
know.
So then in a home that has multiple panels, like say you have a house that has a couple of different electrical panels. Like for instance, my home, I have one main electrical panel, and then I have a second electrical panel because they did an extension on my home, and I have a ranch style home, so it's kind of long.
Sub panel, yeah.
So I have a second panel, but they added foundation when they did my home, so it's likely, and I've had it inspected. I've had a couple of electricians over to add things as time has gone on. They haven't said anything's incorrect. If you add a panel, you'd have to add an extra one of these electrodes, correct?
Yeah. Or connect it to the main. If there's already existing, you just have to connect to it.
Okay.
I mean, these days, all the new construction we do, it's at least 400 amp.
Mm-hmm.
Means that usually one panel is 200 amp. So you have two panels. You will
Yeah.
see 200, 200. That all is connected to the rod, grounding rod. And also, I was saying one thing is waterproofing is very important. As you see, we talk about all the crack water coming from outside and how difficult it is to fix it if that happens. It's better to be cautious when you build a house first time with the new construction. The traditional waterproofing, it on the basement wall, you have footing on either side of the footing. You have to put a drain tile, right? It's like a drain or perforated pipe, and pipe outside and inside is connected inside the house, and that pipe is connected to the sump pump. Danielle, remember I was showing you in the house where you have a lateral weep holes on the
Yes.
footing, every 8 foot on center. That's the one collecting water from outside, inside, and going into the sump pump, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's no flooding, because I just have one bad experience with my client. We sold this spec home about 2 weeks ago. They already moved about 3 weeks ago. Now,
A lot of rain in the last 3 weeks.
guess what? Basement flooded last week.
Oh.
They called me, first thing they called me, oh, my basement flooding. I said, I could have easily said, oh, I already sold my house, call you an insurance company. But then, that's not who I am. For me, I wanted to do the right thing, and I told him, okay, let me be there immediately. So I quickly drive to the side, and this is a first-time home buyer, young couple. They put all their money saving to build this house, buy this house from me, and all of a sudden, the business is freaking, and both of them, I can see their eyes, they're about to cry.
Yeah, because it's terrifying. It's terrifying.
And I had to go and fix it, and we did all. That was not all fault. It's because of different reasons. There was water flooding coming from the neighbor, where neighbor directed their downspout to their house, which is they are not supposed to do that.
No.
That's a different story, because they were checking. It's a new house. I told him, be careful, guys. Go when it's raining. go downstairs in the basement, check often. So they were checking every time, everything is good. And all of a sudden, like 7:45, they say 7:45, they check, everything perfect. 5 minutes come back, they have a sensors go off and come back, all basement flooded. And they're like, sometimes you never know. Now I have to go fix it, and I'm helping them out. Even though I told them I don't have to do it, but because they don't know who to call, who contractor, what to do, water company, we're doing all of that now. Now it's been a 1 week, so far so good.
Did anybody talk to the neighbor and tell them to move their spout?
They already did, exactly. I told him you have to go to the neighbor immediately, and they did it. But the first time home buyer, they didn't know what to do. It's a big house. It just like freak out,
Well, and that's a lot. To like your brand new basement is flooding. Like I'd be pretty terrified too. So it was very nice of you to go and kind of walk them through it. And it sounds like that's a simple fix. Like out, everybody's cool.
I mean, sometimes things like that happens in the basement, like that buried basement. But again, you have to make sure working with the contractor is very important. Work with the contractor, which will take care of you. Will not just take your money and run away. I tell my builders, I'm not a big builder. I'm your neighborhood builder. I'm probably building 5-6 homes a year, which is pretty decent. But at the same time, you have to remember, I'm your neighbor. I live here. My house is here. My office here. My kids go in the same school, same neighborhood like you do. So you have to remember, I'm not gonna just sell this house and run away, guys. I'm gonna help, and I try to keep that word with them, and I think that goes a long way for me.
It does. It's huge. It's really, really huge. So, okay, so you said their sump pump had a sensor that it was over, that it couldn't pump everything that was coming out because it was more than what should have been around the house. What happens when you install a sump pump in like you're designing a basement? How do you determine how many sump pumps, if you need a sump pump? What are your thoughts around that? How do you determine any of that?
Yeah, the sump pump usually, I mean, it depends. If 6,000-7,000 square feet home, maybe just one is fine. Fully buried basement. If it is a big house, maybe 15,000-20,000 square feet home, fully buried. Maybe then you have to do 2 sump pumps. But sometimes if you have a walkout basement, you can even do drain to daylight. So all the water from outside, you don't have to bring it inside. You can always drain it outside where the walkout area is. Okay, does that make sense? If it's walkout basement. So you will still install a sump pump inside the house, and also you have a drainage system inside the house connected to the sump pump, but all the water or that pipe from outside is drained to daylight, so that that water is coming out and there's excess water coming in the basement. But the problem with sump pump, you have to remember, it's electric. If the electric thing means
power goes out,
right? If the electric is off, power line goes off. Sometimes you might need a battery. I recommend backup battery system. It may not cost you a lot of money. You may have to do that. And also you install, there's, especially in this case, these people are smart. They have a company, they install it, they pay, I don't know how much they pay monthly. The sensor goes off, goes to their main office. A main office call their cell phone directly.
So they know even if they're not home, they'll hear, hey,
exactly. They hear it immediately. So one of the things, the problem, they're just saying that when it happens, the Murphy's Law, it happens, it just happens the worst possible way. Is that they call immediately. Guess what? She had her phone in silence for some reason. For both of them, wife and husband. So they were calling, that they were not receiving the call, I just feel bad for them. But again, those are the things you can do. Also, you have to remember, when you say waterproofing, one thing I can tell you, if you're building a house for yourself, maybe it's worth spending a few $1,000s more, which is, if you look at my list, you say when you have a waterproofing outside the basement wall, you spray the black thing, right? It's a bituminous, I think bituminous, bituminous spray. The black thing you spray outside. That's what pretty much all the builders do. Also, what I would do is that install the drain board outside. So it's not that expensive, but that's what I did in my house. I have a spray, also drain board. So now that I have a double protection, the drain board is like a vinyl plastic. It's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah. So even if that paint kind of membrane that you paint on, the waterproofing, you have a backup of like an actual layer in between, like a tarp. Like it's very thick. My sister just had this done to her foundation on her home. It's very thick. It's like rubber mat, like I guess you could say. Like it's substantial. Like it's almost like having like the sole of your shoe, and why the sole of your shoe doesn't get water through it. It's the same idea, but for your house.
Yeah, so that's one way. That's not that's the one you're talking about, almost like sticking on the wall.
Yes,
that's a very similar, but this is actually board itself. You are not attaching; you are just laying vertically into the wall, but it has a holes inside. When it's raining, water is going down directly to the footing. It's not even touching the wall. It's so, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, okay.
You have a board exactly with a vertical hole. So when the water comes from outside, it goes down, boom. It doesn't even touch the wall. So that you have a double protection, right? You have a drain board, and also you have spray, waterproofing system inside the house. It's not touched. Means that instead of 30 years, 40 years, it may be okay for another 100 years.
Yeah.
Because water never touches that spray thing because of the drain board. Those are the minor things. Sometimes you can spend, you're building $2 million home, $1 million home, that's $5,000 is nothing, right? In my mind. Yeah. But the problem is some of the builders, they don't tell you, because, maybe different region. But spec homes, usually, of course, that you want to save money, make more money. But it depends what it is. I try to do a drain board, but make sure that even if you are only doing spray, do it correctly. Check when guys are doing it. Yeah. Because if after your house is done, you backfill and all of a sudden you have a water problem, it's not going to be easy to fix.
Easier to do it up front. Easier and cheaper to do it up front before there's a problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
Makes total sense. And then the last thing on our list, as we kind of like get toward wrapping this up, is third-party inspections. So is there a different process of getting these things as you create the foundation, waterproof it, prepare it for then building the rest of the house? What kind of inspection process would somebody expect to go through?
See, all this inspection, you can always get the county involved, but that's a part of the permit approval and the fee you pay. But when for example, when you excavate the basement before pouring footing, you have to make sure that the ground is, it's not too loose, right? It's not like weight. That's part of the inspection. Then when you pour a concrete footing, all the rebars are properly paid. You have to check with a construction drawing, right? Permit drawing. All that inspection you can do with the county, but sometimes it takes forever. So pretty much all my spec home, I have a third-party inspection. These third-party inspections are third-party, not a county, but they are approved agency from the county. So they're easy to deal with. They know it because this is a private party, So they can come anytime, easy to deal with, and you can save time. So usually all this concrete, the termite, the drainage, the waterproofing, electrodes, all this inspection I do with third party. Anything concrete and the groundwork related, I do third-party inspection. That saves time, and it's not, it's not a lot of money. Usually, it costs about $100 to $150 per inspections. Even depends because of my relation with some of the company. I do much less than $100 for me because we work with them. So, but usually it talks. They charge about $135 to $100, $150 per inspections. It may be worth it rather than wait for a week.
Yeah. Think if you have to add a week to each of the things you just mentioned, the electrode inspection, the waterproofing, like grading, all of these things are separate inspections. If you added a week for say 5 or 6 different items, and we're not even talking about the house being built, we're just talking about the foundation. You also have like your demo permits and all those other permits. If you added a week for each one of them, it's almost like 2 or 3 months of waiting. And if you could just pay $100, $150 per each of those inspections and get them done a little bit faster, it could save you a lot of time and probably cost you less than like $2,000.
No, it does. That's why we go. Sometimes it's worth spending. Maybe you're paying whole project $1,500 for a third-party inspection, but I think you saved weeks on your project, right?
Weeks. And why that actually saves you money is, if you're building something, say you're a developer, and say you're doing this as like an investment project, you likely have hard money, and you're paying interest on that money, and that interest is probably anywhere from 7 to 15%. I will guarantee you, without knowing anything about your project, you're going to spend a lot more than $1,500 in interest for 1 month. I'd say you're probably paying, in some cases, you pay almost $1,500 in interest a week on some of these, depending on what your interest rate is. And that's for like your purchase and your construction loan. And I feel pretty confident saying that about anything in Arlington. So if you're doing something there, you're not saving any money. Like don't nickel and dime over dumb stuff when it can really, anything you can spend a little bit of money to speed up your project on is always going to be better. And I've never heard a homeowner be like, oh, I know I don't want to move in for 2 more months. Like I've never heard someone say that.
They always want to move in yesterday. Yeah.
Awesome.
They always want to ask for, move in yesterday. But Danielle, I think we only have one last item on the list was a frost depth.
Yes.
Maybe like we quickly, a couple of minutes, I can talk about this. And this is a little bit, the frost depth is, so you have to remember every time we lay a foundation and footing, the footing has to be certain feet or inch below ground. Okay, right?
Yes.
Your footing has to be always certain foot or inch below ground. So in Fairfax County, in our area, your footing, bottom of the footing has to be minimum 24 inches from the surface outside.
Okay.
Minimum. So 2 things you have to remember, okay? So you have to remember 2 things is, if the soil is bad, you may have to sometime go down 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot below to find a good soil before you lay that foundation footing, okay? So sometimes you have to go down. But if the soil is good, for example, but it's still in our area, it says you have to go at least 24 inches down from the ground. That's called a frost depth. The frost depth is, frost depth is related to winter. In the winter time, it's very cold outside. Means a part of the ground freezes in the winter time. So the assumption 24 inch in our area is that up to 24 inch ground in the winter time in a severe condition will freezes. That's the assumption. But if you go to New York, Daniel, that's not the 24. That's a 30 inch or 36 inch.
Oh, I'm sure it's colder. I'm from New York. It's cold.
Cold. See, that's how. So frost depth is related to the winter weather, how severe it is. So if you go to New York or Chicago, your frost depth is 36 inch or 30 inch or even 4 foot. But if you go to Florida, there's no frost depth.
Yeah, because they don't get frost.
There is no frost. So if you have a good soil ground, you can lay your footing right on the surface. You don't have to worry about it. Okay. So why you have to do 24 inch is frost depth. Why you have to maintain that frost depth and wood determines that 24. That's depending on the location and historical data for years. They determine that Fairfax County is 24 inch. That's how it is. Okay. Because there may be a time it's very cold, but that's very exception. So what that happens, you have to remember when the ground freezes, the ground it might have water. Yeah. So water, things about water is that this is something found very interesting for me at the beginning when I was in college. That any kind of a material, usually if it is a freezes, it shrinks.
Yep.
Right. If it is a hot weather, it's supposed to expand in volume, in size. But water is its strength. If the water freezes, become ice, its volume increases by 10%.
Yeah.
So you have to remember you have a ground outside the house, and it's a rain, it's a water, and now all of a sudden because of winter it froze. The water inside the ground expanded. So if you don't maintain the frost depth, the water under, water under the footing, below the footing also freezes, right? Because it's less than frost depth from outside. Now, when the water or ground below the ground freezes, the volume expands. When your whole house is going to push up. It will push the house up. So in the winter time, your house pushes up or go up. In summertime, when there is no frost depth, it's going to come down. So I'm of course exaggerating, right? Making worse, but your house is all of a sudden moving up and down in the wintertime and summertime and all throughout. That's not supposed to happen,
Yeah.
right? If that happened, you will see crack and all sort of problem in the house. So to prevent that, you have to maintain minimum 24 inch in our area, which is frost depth. That's the technical
Got it.
term. Okay. Um,
Okay.
but that's the one thing. But again, I don't know if I explained that correctly, but hope it makes sense.
No, that was really clear to me. That was helpful. I didn't realize it was literally rising every year, and it actually makes a lot of sense because again, I have a slab. My house is on a slab, so that means the ground under my slab is raising my house just a little bit, not like feet, but like maybe a couple of inches in the winter. My whole house.
Danielle, you have a footing outside on the outside perimeter of the house. The footing is always below frost depth. It's there. So the assumption is even your slab is above frost depth. The assumption is the water will not, the temperature, cold temperature or ground freezing will not go underneath your footing and come on the slab. It's not going to happen. If you maintain that 24 inch around it, the inside area is protected.
Got it.
Even if you have a slab on grade, but you have a footing outside, which is 24 inch frost depth, you're okay. Yeah, you're not gonna fly up.
Okay, so my house isn't going up and down.
You're not going anywhere.
We're good.
But sometimes people just do slab only outside, like parking. For example, you have a driveway or parking garage outside. You don't do frost depth. That's why you see cracks sometimes. Right? Because I'm not gonna say it's due to 100% frost depth, but it could be if the ground is not properly compacted or things like that. But one of the reasons is definitely frost depth because you typically don't maintain that frost depth.
Yeah, I mean that's a very deep driveway.
Yeah, exactly. If you have to do that, it would be very, very expensive. So that's what I think. So you sometimes and also there are two types of concrete. When you do outside concrete, you're supposed to call air entrance. There are different types of concrete, but sometimes it's the same concrete. No, the concrete you use for outside and inside is supposed to be different. But people use the same concrete and they have a problem. Outside concrete, the concrete that you use for the basement slab, if you use same thing in a driveway, it's not going to work properly. But if you don't ask them, they don't do it. They don't tell you, of course, because it's a little more expensive. It's called outside. It's called air entrained concrete. Inside is regular concrete. Air entrained concrete means outside. You have to remember they intentionally put the air on the concrete. There's air pocket. So remember, in the winter time on the water, it's raining. All the water, because concrete is porous, all the water can go inside the concrete mass.
Yeah.
Right? And you have all those porous, and water is hiding is sitting in the porous. So in winter time, what happens is that if the concrete slab freezes, all of a sudden you have a crack because all the water inside those porous is going to expand by 10% as a crack. So what they do is that it's not going to cost you much, and there's called air entrained concrete, means you intentionally put more air and voids. So when water becomes ice and volume increases, there's a room for expansion. So they create that pocket, air pocket inside the concrete for concrete, your water to expand. But again, it seems like a lot of mechanism going on to allow those air pocket, but it's not. There's some chemical you just have to mix with the concrete, and you create that. But again, if you don't ask them, they don't do it because it's going to cost you a couple of $1,000 or so. But again, I'm saying sometimes it could be easy fix, and that could save you thousands, I would say years of headache to you and to your family. But the other thing, maybe you want to talk with the contractor, as I said, in the builder. They don't tell you if you especially doing spec home. If you're doing custom home, this thing you definitely talk to the builder. This spec homes is already built, so you don't know what it is. It is already there. So hopefully it's done properly. But we do. So hopefully give some idea when you talk with your contractor building a spec home or building a new homes, it's a custom home, ask all these questions. And sometimes the contractor, they don't say all these things because all these things mean additional cost. And they say, okay, because they probably already have fixed budget. And if we say, do this, do that, and a homeowner start thinking, why you didn't include it before? If this is such good for me, for my family, for that structure. So sometimes they don't even say it because, there's a competition, a lot of builders, they want to get a job. So probably of the price is one of the factors in selecting a builder. And you found a builder within your budget. Now all of a sudden this builder say, hey, do this.
Not your budget.
Yeah.
No, it's so true. That's such a good tip. Awesome. Well, Raj, as usual, this is very enlightening. I have learned a ton, and I appreciate you sharing all of your expertise in this. But we will be back next week for some more builder tips. And if you have any questions about what we talked about today, feel free to leave a comment, and Raj and I will get back to you as soon as we can. Awesome. All right. Well,
thank you.
Raj,
thanks,
bye.
See you next week.